motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're going to have an executive session. This meeting is in session. 6 o'clock, and there was no action taken in executive session. The first item on this agenda is, or the second item, general manager's report.
Mr. Chairman, members, the only thing I have is a financial report. Andrew's going to give that for your white binders. Tab 1. White binders.
Yeah, this one?
Yes. Tab 1.
Okay. Thank you. Oh.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mayor, this is a presentation on the financial performance of BPUB as of November 30th, 2005. My name is Leandro Garcia. I'm the Director of Finance and Chief Financial Officer. On this first slide, what we're presenting here is on a monthly basis and year-to-date basis the revenue items here. As you can see, net operating revenues for November were $15,830,481. As of year-to-date, $37,842,101. We have additional revenues from other sources, and when you add these other revenues, and primarily from penalties and connection, service connection charges, when you add these other revenues, interest from investments and other non-operating income, our gross revenues ended up being $16,555,554 for November and $39,286,935 for year-to-date as of November 30th. In order to get to the adjusted gross revenues as prescribed by the new bond ordinance to establish the base for the City of Brownsville transfer, we do on a monthly basis back out fuel and energy costs, wholesale energy expenses, and our contribution to O&M and debt service for the Southmost Regional Water Authority. Those amounts for November, after netting amount, resulted in adjusted gross revenues of $9,039,742 for November, and cumulative through November 30th, $18,696,098. And this adjusted gross revenues base is what we use for calculating the City of Brownsville transfer, 10% of that amount. On the expense side, O&M expenses here today were $6.1 million. Other non-operating expenses were $121,000 for a total of $6,263,388. Adding in debt service obligation, that's for long-term debt and our commercial paper interest expense, year to date at $4,043,787. We're at total requirements, total expenses of $5,353,015 for November and $10,307,175, both October and November combined. When you back out these amounts from our gross revenues, or adjusted gross revenues, that left a balance of $7,563,268 for distribution to PUB and the City of Brownsville. The $7,563,268 here is shown as being allocated as $1,043,954 to the City of Brownsville, net of usage, and $6,519,314 for PUB. PUB's share is then further allocated based on the approved budget to our operating reserve addition. If you recall, our approved budget established a goal of adding another $1 million to our previously established $12.5 million operating reserve fund. this transfer on a 1/12 basis, $166,674 through November 30th. Our operating sub-account for to supplement the fuel adjustment, our approved budget, we established the goal of setting aside $4 million through the end of the year to supplement any fuel adjustment adjustments or requirements in the future. We have set aside $666,604. Our capital improvement project funding, the annual budget for this was $10,700,000. We have set aside $1,783,334. Our improvement reserve fund, this $500,000 through November will be part of a $3 million improvement reserve fund we will accumulate through the end of fiscal year 2006. That $3 million is part of a 5-year plan for us to accumulate $15 million in our improvement reserve fund. And then the surplus, the last bucket, reflects here an accumulation of $3,402,632. When compared to the 2005 and the budgeted numbers, I'll just briefly go over this graph here. Our 37.8 net operating revenues exceeded our 2005 numbers by the 21.2 million by 16.6 million, or 78%. It also exceeds our budgeted net operating revenues of 24.8 million by 13 million. Our gross revenues, 39.3 million, also pretty much exceeds our 22.2 million in 2005 and 25.7 million 2006 budgeted numbers. Adjusted gross revenues, 18.7 million, was 5.1 million over the 2005 through November, at 18.6 million, and 3.8 million, or 25.5% over the 14.9 budgeted. Fuel and energy costs, as we all know, we experienced high energy costs in October, November, with the cumulative requirement of 15.3 million. That's well exceeds the 7.5 actual numbers 205 by 7.8 million, and the 10 million budgeted by 5.3 million. O&M expenses have been maintained at lower than budgeted levels of 6.1 million versus 6.5 million budgeted, and a little over the 2005 actual of 5.2. This graph compares the balance available for PUB and CLB. Our 7.6 million is well above the 4.2 actual for November of 04, and the 3.4 budgeted through November of 05 current fiscal year. PUB here again has their allocation of 6.5 million compared to the 2.5 budgeted and 3.3 actual last year, and the city's share of 1 million, slightly over the 900,000 actual last year and budgeted this year. This graph just shows a contribution by each utility, the electric, water, and wastewater, to the balance available for distribution to PUB and the CLB.
Can you go back to 7?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
This graph shows electric consumption, tracking it from the beginning of the year to the previous year. So you can see our 06 started off higher in October due to weather conditions, and then dropped below the 2005 level down to 81 million kilowatt hours compared to the 87 million from the previous year. Water did the same thing pretty much. We dropped from consumption of 511,000 in October to 480,000 in November, whereas last year we had done the opposite, had an increase from October through November. For course, wastewater follows the same pattern and a decrease from October to November. This next slide, we're going to try to report on monthly is the status of our capital expenditures. Previous reports that touched mainly on O&M. What I'd like to do is give you a continuing report on CIP. This graph summarizes this chart summarizes the spending levels between or among the categories, different categories we fund: general, electric, water, and wastewater by funding source. The first row, you'll see that in the general plant side we spent $11,000, electric $875,000, water $181,345, wastewater $84,000, for a total of $1.1 million out of the improvement fund. Improvement fund being the current revenue transfers. We do have 3 bond sources that we're still using: the 2001, the 2003, and then most recently the issue back in August 2005 new bond monies. This will show where the expenditures are being funded from by each utility, and we also are reporting on the impact fees that we're utilizing for some water and wastewater improvements as well. So you can see the total expenditures for all utilities was $1,877,099 through November. We also wanted to capture here any pending encumbrances, POs, purchase orders that have been issued that obligate the budget dollars. Through November, we had $3.2 million encumbered for a total combined expenditures and obligations of $5,158,34. The capital plan, spending plan approved by the board for 06 was at a $39,921,279 level, which in this case, when you compare the $5.1 million to 39, we're at 12.9% rate of accomplishment here. I was informed earlier that some of the POs may have not been captured in the encumbrance, so we'll be issuing a supplement to y'all, but I think we're lacking about another close to $1 million that we could have reported here, but we'll update that through December. And that ends the financial overview.
You exceed the projections that you had in your revenues. I noticed that quite a bit.
Yes, sir.
Okay, at the end of the year, this spend keeps going up. Since we are a nonprofit, some of that will be going to the city, and some of it will be going to capital improvements and so forth. It will also help on the reduction of rates, I assume.
Absolutely, that's something we'll consider carrying over balances to 2007.
Because you are exceeding quite a bit.
Correct.
What I saw in gross revenues quite a bit.
Yeah, it should be favorable for.
So
One of the things I'm looking for towards the end of the year.
It's a silver lining.
So one of the things I'm going to be looking for is we did have a bond issue scheduled for rainy summer. We're going to be watching that very closely. So if we can fund some capital expenditures out of the surplus money, the improvement, that will defer any additional debt and thereby extend the requirement for additional rate increases to meet the debt service requirements. So we'll be looking at that towards the third quarter of the year and forming that a budget that represents, that reflects the accumulations.
Thank you for including the water and wastewater projections in here.
Okay.
We're now getting.
I've got a couple of questions real quick. What happened on the sick leave entry for November?
We had, based on the salary adjustments, for employees that had up to I think we can accumulate up to 720 hours, we kind of revalued those hours. So the way it works is you expense them, and then the regular wage budget carries any use of sick leave thereafter.
So it was basically a front-end entry, and at the end of the year, it's going to get closer to the budgeted amount?
It'll be offset by what's actually used for the regular expense, but to create the liability increase based on the new hourly rates, on the balance sheet, we expensed them and created the liability. And then we'll manage with their use on a monthly basis.
And how are you coming along on fixed asset accounting?
Fixed assets has, we've shown very good progress. External auditors have been here for quite some time and have been here this week as well. And what we have achieved thus far is acceptance by the auditors on the methodology of how we're going to be adjusting some of the entries in our CPRs, the continuing property record software system. They did quite a bit of sampling, and based on staff's ability to substantiate the existence, evaluations of some of the sampled items, we have been given the green light to proceed with making some of those adjustments. We knew up front that we had some over-evaluations in many entries because of the approach that the consultant had employed. So our approach internally was to seek as much documentation to substantiate all entries, and with the emphasis being on the pretty large volume dollar items. We did meet expectations of the auditor in our proceeding with making necessary adjustments. Last year, the CPR itself was not recognized, the values. The auditor resumed with recognizing asset records from the previous audit. So we have an ability now, an opportunity to adjust the CPR and then recognize that as the official asset software system, asset values. We're still with the working under the goal to have the final audit within our SPRAC deadlines.
But you're running a year behind, so when do you think this is going to come before us? When do you think they'll be finished, the auditors?
We have to finish within the next few weeks. Our goal is to have a draft audit report by mid to late February, earlier if we can. We do have to provide the city finance department with our schedule so that they can complete theirs and report as a component unit. March 31st has got to be the drop dead date. That's when we have to submit disclosures to the depository agencies that work with investors. But we're hoping to do it by the end of February. Hopefully, we'll have a finance committee meeting and then briefing in mid-February, and then the board presentation by the auditor in late February, a special call meeting perhaps, or early March. But no,
You mentioned that the fixed asset figures were lower than what that was previously keyed in.
What I'm saying is that when the consultant was hired and they did their evaluation, the values were the difficulty that staff encountered last year was substantiating some of the values because they were overstated.
So that's what I mean. Okay, they were overstated, but to the degree that it's going to make a big difference, or what percentage?
And that's what I'm saying. The auditor last year did not recognize the system values. They went with what was previously recognized with previous auditors, and then just did a simple additions retirements. This year, our goal is to have the auditors recognize that database, but with adjusted values. So it won't be like we'll be adjusting drastically what we've previously reported in audit reports, because the database didn't come into play. It was kind of set aside pending further completion, further assessment of the data.
The problem was the methodology that was applied back then to substantiate the overinflated values.
We're adopting the historical cost, and the staff's goal has been to gather as much info to substantiate historical cost, or if a calculation needs to be made based on current replacement, kind of take it back, discount it back to the vintage year. But
you're taking out the equipment that needs to be retired and stuff like that, right?
yes, sir. Yes, what we
We're
doing,
not going to be carrying it just for the sake of carrying the number. We'll list it as.
no, once it's fully depreciated and retired, and taken out of service, we will continue to, or we will discontinue to carry it.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions?
Any more
on the rest?
questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Rosen. Next item is item 3, discussion of status of impact fee study. Mr. Capitan.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this is a status report on the impact fee studies, and Mr. Richard Campbell with Black & Beach is here. While he gets set up, I'll just brief the board on where we are. We did have the meeting of the Capital Improvement Advisory Committee on the 20th of December. That was the kickoff meeting. We did also present the schedule. I think all that information was provided to you as information as well, and what we're looking for. What we'd like to do today is to begin the discussion about 2 key components of how we get to determining the impact fee, and that is a discussion of the land use assumptions and also the capital improvement plan. The capital improvement plan in particular is key because that will identify the projects that would be deemed eligible for consideration, how we calculate the impact fee. The committee, by the statute, is to actually provide assistance to the City Commission in terms of how they adopt the land use assumptions. Also, as it relates to the capital improvement plan, the City Commission will also approve that plan, but the committee is charged with providing written comments on that plan. All of that will be done before the City Commission actually entertains the hearing that it will hold to determine what the impact fees will be in terms of what the maximum allowable is and all of that input. So the committee does have a charge to work on providing input on the land use assumptions as well as providing input on the capital improvement plan. What we'd like to do is just give you an update. We do have a committee meeting planned for tomorrow, and the same discussion in terms of the land use assumptions and the capital improvement plan will be had at the committee. Our goal is to have in February arrived at a point where we can begin to give you a number that begins to look at what possibly you may be looking at in terms of this board as well as the committee, and eventually what the City Commission may be considering on the maximum allowable per impact fee. We've got some maps, and just I will go over them briefly. We can get them on the screen. If we can do that very quickly. Okay, that is very hard to see. We can do that this way. I don't know if this is any easier. Essentially, the data that will be utilized is on the land use assumptions, is making some assumptions on what kind of growth and what is driving that growth in the city of Brownsville. On that particular map, what you can't see, what's very difficult to see, is essentially the city.
Mr. Campilano, get on the microphone, please. Thank you, sir.
That is, just can't see it. That's the problem. This particular
Why don't
map.
you just turn on the lights?
Yeah, we can work off of that map. That'll work better. This particular map just shows you essentially where the current city limit lines are, and you can see where the city is growing in terms of its annexations. And then it shows the city's ETJ. The city of Brownsville has a 5-mile ETJ. It encompasses other small cities that essentially shows their ETJs. You have Bayview, you have Laguna Vista, you have Los Fresnos, San Benito, Los Indios, and Harlingen over here. So that kind of shows you what the city of Brownsville has done in terms of its annexations, where it's ETJ, where it can look to grow, and essentially how those boundaries begin to abut with other surrounding cities. What this map begins to look at is, if you look at this map, this essentially is on the wastewater certification boundaries. In other words, Brownsville PUD is bound by boundaries on where it can provide wastewater services. This is a map that shows our certification. So we can provide wastewater services in all of this area. And then there's a cutoff right about here where we share a jurisdiction with other entities and then come back down here and provide wastewater services. What this shows is where we already have wastewater services. So you can see that Brownsville proper, and as the city grows north and you see subdivision development to the north, you begin to see the extension of services to these areas. Here, we have jurisdiction with another entity that can also provide wastewater services. So that's the sewer service. The next map is the water services. On the water services, what you see here is very similar boundaries with the exception of, if you notice on wastewater, we could go over here. Water cuts off here. And we also have jurisdiction, or we share ability to serve with other areas. This area here, you show, is entirely El Jardín, for example. El Jardín is totally within the Brownsville CCN, so we can provide water services anywhere as El Jardín can provide water services. We can't provide water services up here, for example, because that's singly certified to Olmito. Then you begin to see military highway water supply, you see the Valley Mud, you see the East Rio Hondo. So on those boundaries, while the city of Brownsville can grow and continue to grow, we cannot provide services outside of the areas where we're certified to serve. And what this simply shows you here is, again, on all the hash marks, is areas where we already see currently water services. So as the city continues to grow in areas where we can be the water provider, you'll see the extension. These are the kinds of base data and information we will be working with, and working with the city in terms of what kinds of land use assumptions we'll be looking at to determine what kind of growth the city might be having, what is driving that growth, and what some of those assumptions can be. What we're thinking is, as in 1990, a lot of the growth that is being driven is single family. It's subdivision, development growth, and we can see where some of those trends occur. We will be working with the city in helping identify perhaps other areas where there may be other types of growth corridors. And Mr. Ben Medina with the city is here, so that's part of the land use assumptions, is a lot of coordination with the city of Brownsville and working on that.
Go ahead.
Let me stop you real quick. With regards to what you just said about some of the areas being outside, are we going to get the information so that we know what it would cost to develop where it's Valley Mud or Rio Hondo? Can we get that information?
We would not be going there. I mean, what we can do,
but for purposes of comparison, in other words,
what we can get, for example, is, and I think part of the comparative data, for example, would be we think about our competitors being surrounding valley cities, but really the competitors may be closer to home. In other words, Olmito, El Jardín, East Rio Hondo, military highway water supply, Valley Mud. Because once if you want to develop here, for example, well, we can't. So a developer is going to come in, or whoever, it may be individual, whoever, and is going to have to deal with that entity. Now, we're a little bit differently because we are governed by the statute on how you set up impact fees. These water corporations and water supply corporations, they're not governed under the same statute. They basically establish, no, because they're a different unit of government. So they establish whatever fees they feel they should charge. And I mean, that's an issue that as development begins to occur. In fact, Mayor, if you recall, I think of the last annexations, the city had about 9 of them. Only 2 or 3 of them were within where we could serve water and wastewater. Everything else you were already talking about, East Rio Hondo, Olmito, Military Highway Water Supply Corporation.
Before we go any further, El Jardín should be considered as part of the boundaries that we're going to be incorporating in the future. I think this is a good time for management to contact the board and bring both boards together, and I know Chris and I have talked about this, because it's going to be a cost to us that we need to include in this study if we know it's going to happen. Okay, we're going to be taking over them. And so I think this is the ideal time that we sit down with that board and come to the meeting of the minds to where maybe we can draft a contract with a time frame as to when we're going to take them over so we can project our costs to incorporate into the study.
I thought that's kind of been discussed, obviously, but we're trying to take advantage of their status.
Well, there's a couple of things with that, if I may.
They have never wanted to
And-
commit.
Mr. Amada's correct. Now, for projects in which we have growth,
Those rules off.
yeah, for projects where we have growth, we will include those because we can build anywhere as El Jardín can build. What we're talking about is you're not going to overbuild them if it doesn't. But the issue with El Jardín isn't new growth so much as that their existing system, that you cannot include in impact fees. If you're going
So if
to,
we're going to be upgrading, yes, we can.
well, if you're going to be adding capacity and that capacity is being driven by a certain type of growth, then you can. And that's where we get into the CIP plan, and that's going to be the big issue with the CIP, is reviewing the projects that are in there and working to determine whether or not those meet the threshold of whether you're adding capacity to the system or not. That's where our consultant will actually assist us and play a big role.
Some portions of the system that General Manager Gutierrez here needs to be upgraded, they know that. And they're looking for grants that they may never get, but that we're going to have to
And I think
absorb.
we've got some of those projects identified in that area, in El Jardín, that water loops and things that they're in there.
But I think it'd be good to get both boards together and get some kind of time frame, because they keep telling us it's going to happen in the future.
Yes,
and
they've been saying that
Yeah.
for a long time.
It's been going on for far too long. So I would like to
Do
see
a
that.
joint workshop.
Yeah, I would ask you to do that.
The next map begins to show you, for example, this is the current land use. So what we've all taken is, we've just simply taken the city map, and you can see where our boundaries are we can serve, and you can see how the city is currently in terms of land uses. And a lot of the development that's going on in these growth corridors, like here and here, and what you see is residential development. So we will work with them and determine whether some of the growth that may be occurring, for example, if there's going to be an industrial corridor developed there, or some of those areas, how might those assumptions impact the land use assumptions that would go into determining the applicability of impact fees in the future, or projects that would be eligible for impact fees in the future. This is the same map, but this just looks at water. Again, the only difference is that the water certification cuts off here, but you can see what is happening in the same areas in terms of how the city is currently, the land use of it. A lot of the development that's going on is residential development. With this map, and this is a map that kind of shows, what this shows is since 2002, what has occurred in the development. And you can see that development is occurring, not only in the northern part of the city, but you're seeing vacant land being developed within the city that is, in some cases, maybe adding capacity to the system, and it's not all being driven by what is going up on the north side of town. So what this shows is since 2002, all the subdivisions that have been platted onto the system and where those occur. So this I believe is wastewater, so you can see that within this boundary. Now, up here we show these, but the only reason those are there is because those are electric. So those are, remember, on the electric, we can continue to go outside our CCN under the agreement with CPL. So you need to discount these because those are electric. But everything in here, where you see here and here, as well as all down here, those are water, wastewater. And some of these, again, they're in singly certified PUB when you get into the town proper. And so you do see development occurring inside the city that is new development, new subdivisions coming up.
Where we're annexing single certified electrical suppliers, that's not PUP like CP now.
AEP.
Okay. Do we have an agreement with them that we can automatically provide service?
The way that agreement works is that if the city annexes territory into what is a single certified AEP, and it becomes part of the city, and we have a request from the property owner, whether it's an individual or a developer, whatever, for electric service, is that we can apply to serve that specific development or that specific piece of property to the PUCT. And the PUCT can grant our consideration to serve that customer. And the agreement we have is that AEP will not contest any of those. So how we've been growing on their electrical, for example, here we had a request from the developer says, I want service from PUB. So we had to, what we do is we make a request to the PUCT to amend our service area to include that development. It doesn't mean that you have everything up to it. It's that specific development. That is Mesquite Gardens, I believe. It's on 803. Right here, this particular development, we are serving it. The developer requested service from PEB. That is on the intersection of Highway 100 and 803. And this development is inside the city of Brownsville, and it's already across Highway 100 and on 803. I believe this is at Villa de las Resacas. It's supposedly an exclusive, very high-end residential development. But in these cases, the developers have written PUB saying, we want you to be the electric provider, and that starts the process.
Yes.
If you remember on the gross revenues of the breakup.
I understand that, but I mean, when you look at the cost.
The electric side, well, we look at it from the standpoint of whether or not it's beneficial. If you have an individual homeowner that, wants service and it's going to cost $20,000, if it's not feasible, we're not going to.
So there's enough there to support.
Yes, sir.
Because it is a long way.
Yeah, and that's the sewer. Again, you're going to see the same thing on the water, which is the next one. But again, there's a cutoff here. So you can see that on the sewer side, we're here, but on water, we cut off here. But you see the same thing. The development is going on in other areas of the city. It's not just on the north side, but we see it in a lot of places around the city of Brownsville. That is kind of the information that the committee will be getting, and we will be working with the city to determine the land use assumptions. On the capital improvement plan, which we begin to talk about. Now this begins, I guess to some degree, you talk about the meat and potatoes, and this is where we look at, and Richard is going to pass out what we have is our working draft on the capital improvement plan. What you see on that plan in effect is all of the capital improvements that we have on the books for the next 5 years. And you will see references, codes to that may talk about rehabilitation or replacement. We may have maintenance projects. We try to list all of our projects. Now, the task is to go through those and determine, okay, which of those projects are the types of projects that are going to have to be done in order to expand capacity of the system. And it's those projects that will be looked at and justifications made to determine what is the total value of those projects. And that's the basis of the number that is used to look at, okay, if these projects meet the threshold, then that's your basis for determining what kind of impact or what your maximum allowable will be. And if you look at that, you see that we have about $130 million in projects identified over the next 5 years. That takes you through 2010. The land use assumptions, one thing. On the land use assumptions, that's a 10-year horizon. We're working with a 5-year horizon here because the assumption is that we're going to have to come back before the next 5 years are over and revisit the impact fee calculation. So here, we're looking at all of the projects that there is on that, a determination that you're looking at roughly half of the, 60% of the projects that have been identified are projects that are being driven by capacity, need to add capacity to the system. And that's really where the committees and everybody's work begins, is looking at those projects, is the justification for those projects, because that's in effect where the meat and potatoes of this is going to be. And once we arrive at what that number, now the committee is going to have to provide written comments to the City Commission before they approve the land use assumptions as well as the capital improvement plan. Their role is to be an advisory committee, granted, but the statute does require them to provide written comments on both the land use and the CIP. Both of those will have to be approved by the City Commission before we move on to the public hearing and the setting of what the maximum allowable in adoption of impact fees. So the committee has its work cut out for them. I did say we do meet tomorrow. We will begin to meet with them, to review those projects, to answer questions, to make sure that whatever recommendation we may have as staff and what we've looked at and said we believe that these projects qualify and should be looked at eligible for impact fees, that they cut the mustard.
And it's open to the public, so.
That's correct. It is a very public process. Not only are we having this discussion here, the committee meetings are public. They will be required to submit comments. Before the city commission can deliberate any of this, it will have to publish notices that there will be public hearings for this discussion, and any deliberations they have will also be done in public. So
March meetings at the city hall.
On the fourth floor.
What time?
It's at 5:30, I believe, at the same time the city commission is meeting. And you know, the committee's work will be, you know, how often do we need to meet to go through this and get it to where they feel that they can provide their comments. But we've gone through it from a staff perspective with the assistance of the consultant on the preliminary review and reviewing the justification. So we've in effect established what we think the discussion points will be and how much of those values should be looked at for inclusion of impact fees. We have projects in there that are oversizing lines, that are, we know that we have to start looking at a sewage treatment facility. We've got in there that we are looking to expand an existing facility. So all of those projects and all of those values, I'm sure, will be scrutinized and debated. So again, this is what's going to drive a lot of the discussion.
The sewage plant on Robindale, are you all planning to invest quite a bit of money?
Right now, Mr. Almada, what we're looking at is the potential expansion of that plant. You're looking at expanding it by 5 million MGD, and you're looking for, I think the figure that we're using right now is about $13 million.
Is that going to take care of the odor problem? Right?
That would be part of could be included in that, if we do that project.
The other consideration could very well be that instead of expanding an existing plant, is that you build a third plant in another location where you may see the growth going. So I mean, but the project is on there, and all of that would be part of that discussion. You know, if you're going to build a third plant, you've got to include your cost of land acquisition. Are you going to, you know, all of that goes into that. But we do believe that it's going to be necessary. You're going to have to include a discussion about either expanding the existing facility or adding additional capacity on the sewage treatment site. And that's going to have to come within the 5 years. We don't believe we can avoid putting it off and putting it off and putting it off.
It's serious.
We've got 22.8 million total capacity on the system, and I think our averages right now are about 17 million. So in 5 years, and actually you're required, when you reach 75% capacity, you're required to begin planning for it. So that's going to occur in the next 5 years, whether we like it or not. So.
Mr. Capitano, when is, there seems to be different opinions or different ideas here on the board of when that impact study fee will be completed and reported to us. I'm hearing last meeting, I believe, somebody here said 4 or 5 months. And then we're trying to remember on a past meeting where it was, I think, Chris, good?
They did, I requested the agenda, because there was a question of if it was going to be 120 days, and I think last meeting they said it was between 6 to 9 months. But I have a question for you. In order for you in order for your firm to finish this impact fee study, you need information from this committee.
Right.
Right? Because you need to know where it's going to grow and stuff. Because on your bid, you said 90, that you could be done 90 to 100 days, but that's if the committee had given you everything, you know.
Sure, where it
we
stands
kind of
right
started
now,
late on that.
We're really about on track still, because we had said 3-4 months.
Yeah, you
Started
said
about the end of October.
Yeah, but the problem is that
We should give you a solid impact fee number in February.
yeah,
Then our process kind of steps out of it, and you have to move through with your public hearing.
So you're gonna come in with a figure that says, this is what we think,
Is your maximum allowable?
this is, so you are gonna give us a number?
Sure, yes, sir.
Okay, that's what I was,
And, yeah.
that was one of my questions, and then there's,
But it can slow at this point because this is where the committee comes in, public hearings come in.
But it all depends how often we have our meetings, because we
Absolutely.
just have one meeting and we're just getting started.
Right.
The schedule that we gave the committee and the schedule that we shared with you all looked at having arrived at some idea of what that number may be on the maximum allowable sometime in February. Now, there's still a lot of work to answer Mr. Sanchez's question. There's still a lot of work between now and when the public hearing or the commission may act on what the impact fee charge is going to be. Now, they don't completely go out of the picture. They're still going to need to support this process, but here it is, and so they're going to need to support us. Also, remember that their scope wasn't just come up with a number of the impact fee. They've got other work to do when we finish with the impact fee stuff. We still have to do some comparative analysis of fees, and they're still going to be looking at some of our other services and making some recommendations on fees, our contributions in native construction, looking at the data we gathered on comparables, how do we compare with others. But the big emphasis will be the impact fee.
But we hired them for the study. Why is PUB getting in there just to help out with the numbers? We want to hear from the study from their research. Now, another thing, is it going to be the February board meeting that we get the amount, or are you guys going to make us wait till March?
Depends on how much work we do between now and then.
But the meetings are public. I mean, if anybody attends February meetings, you're going to know what it is.
Now, getting back to the question about that, we supply them the data. I mean, and a lot of the data that they've requested has been for staff, and we've been working on this since October to, here are our projects, here's the description, and so we have been working and we have been providing them. Now, there are certain things that they need to do. Part of the scope was also to make some recommendations on your capital improvement projects and your capital improvement plan, what kinds of things that may be pulled out where they're not going to be applicable to future rates, because that was that whole discussion that brought it. A big part of it is the impact fees, but it doesn't just stop with the impact fees on what they're to do for the final report to this board.
The committee's got to, the advisory committee's got to make the decision as to what it's going to recommend as far as, like, for instance, the Robindale plant. Is it going to expand, or is it going to build another plant, to include in your study? So, I mean, you can't come February and give us a realistic number, without having that data available to you.
We still need some
The
direction.
committee's got to meet and come up to those conclusions. The problem is that the committee didn't meet for the first 90 days or 120 days, whatever it was. We're just getting started, so we're a little behind.
Why was that?
Hopefully we'll get going, and then
Your committee did not get appointed until October, September, October.
I think the other thing, Mr. Amato, is on some of those decisions this board has to make too first, where we're going to build it. And these capital improvements, that's why we want this board to be the one that recommends to the committee, and then from the committee to the, because that's some big decisions, whether we build a new plant or expand. Big dollar.
The other
I
thing,
urge us all to get educated real quick.
the other thing too is that, remember, this can be adjusted. I mean, right now you may be saying, okay, for the purposes of the work that we're looking at an expansion, but in 2 years from now you say, no, we're going to build a new plant. You go back and revisit the plan, and you make the adjustment for what it would cost you to build a new plant.
But then how do you adjust the impact?
You can do that. Actually, I'm sorry, Richard.
Go there. This is one of my better presentations, actually.
What I want us to do is get all the eggs in the basket, because I don't want us to come back in 2 years from now with all these adjustments that we didn't foresee or whatever, didn't plan properly. And then it's hard to raise the impact fee. Hey, you just raised it 2 years.
It's almost impossible
Right.
to catch everything.
Was that kind of the, not exactly was done the last one, but they had a tier 1, tier 2 levels, like base, there's a maximum, and there's some that you absolutely do need in a range. Are you going to, is there thought of presenting 2 numbers, or just going to be a maximum allowable? Because the impact fee study that we previously had 2.
And I think what we're going to lean on the consultant to tell us is, look, you've come up with a maximum allowable, but you do this enough for enough cities that you should make some recommendations to this board on how, and to everybody, on how you think we should proceed. I mean, if it's going from this number to this number, I mean, other cities have to deal with that. So we're going to ask them to make some recommendations.
Their job is pretty cut and dry. They're looking at costs. They're looking at costs based on our projection, and they'll come up with that number. It's a hard number.
It's true.
I mean, what we got to do is look at the public and say, okay, everybody's paying their fair share. You know, this is the cost based on the projection.
Well, those costs,
We will advise different ways to cost it.
Cost is the cost.
those costs will either be paid through the impact fee or future rates. No other difference. So that'll be the maximum fee will determine the minimum amount of rate increases.
But it's up to him to come up with it. Hey, this is your cost. Whatever you decide, you want to go low, that's up to you.
Right.
And pass that on to the ratepayers. That's up to the board here in the city commission.
Right.
But you're going to give us, this is your cost.
Right.
This is your built-in cost to break even.
Is that it, Eddie?
Pretty much, yes, sir.
Thank you. Very good presentation.
Thank you.
I'm kind of proud of myself, actually.
Thank you.
I stumbled a little bit, but I apologize for
I
that.
already noticed it.
Item 4, consideration approval of bid award for construction services for the Valle de Mozo Main Road Sanitary Sewer Project. Ms. Lawrence.
Mr. Chairman. Just interject real quick. if it's okay.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board,
If it's okay with all the other members, I'd like to maybe group numbers 4 through 7. They seem to be pretty standard. Everything seems to be online.
Go ahead.
But if the other board members want to hear something out, you know, by all means.
I don't have a problem.
4 and 7? Go
Number
ahead.
5, 6, and 7.
All right.
And I move that we approve items number 4, 5, 6, and 7.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? All opposed?
I abstain on that one.
All right, 1 abstention.
Yeah.
All right, so item 4, 5, 6, and 7 are approved. Item 8, consideration approval of contract to update Brownsville PV's digital orthophotography and related planimetric base mapping. Mr. Anonymous.
You did pretty good there, Mr. Chairman.
Wow.
Chairman, members of the board, this consideration approval of a contract with Merit Company to update the VPUG digital orthophotography and related planimetric base mapping for $231,726. The imagery update is the area that PUD wants to update is approximately 198 square miles. This map right here, there's 3 different sections to it. You can see the little red boxes. Part of the section is white, part of the section is yellow, and part is green. The white and yellow were the original area that was mapped back in 2001 for a cost of about $436,000. The area that we're proposing here in this proposal to do the orthophotography is the yellow and the green. It's changed a little bit because as we just saw, Brownsville's growing kind of to the north. So we met with the electrical department and the water wastewater department and asked them what they would like, and they included the area in green on top. We're also going to include the original area in yellow, but we're not going to redo the area that's in white because that hasn't had that much growth.
Let me ask you something. It may be very totally stupid, but I can ask a question anyway for my own personal satisfaction. We are owned by the city, and I'm sure the city deals with this too, the planning department, the engineering department, traffic department. Is any of this helpful to them?
Yes, sir. In fact, at the very end of your packet is a list of about 80 agencies or 100 agencies that currently log into our
But are we duplicating this to where we're paying more than we should instead of maybe coming together and having it all done for everybody?
Well, all these other agencies, like you said, City of Brownsville, various departments, the University of Texas here at Brownsville, TxDOT, there are a lot of agencies that do use that information, but once we do it, it's deemed public information, so they have access to it.
So they get it for you.
Basically. Now, the way we've done it is...
Mayor, that's not fair. You pitch in half.
Well,
It works the same way when we need information from the state.
They get offered as dividend at the end of the year.
You know what, Mr. Lettuce, it's not a laughing matter. We're looking at $231,000 here, plus how much to purchase it, about $400,000?
The original was about 400,000.
Ladies and gentlemen, and the city of Brownsville uses it as much as us, maybe even more than us. Fire, police, ambulance, it goes on and on and on. Do we get any charges from them?
No.
Do we charge them? Do we invoice them? Do we get any money from them for it?
We don't charge anybody.
Nobody. And then there's also developers use this too.
Yes, sir. If it's public information,
Do we charge them?
we don't charge anybody.
I'm not too excited about, as a PUB board member, putting the full price and us paying for the full price. Can we get any help from the city of Brownsville? Have y'all invited them to help participate in the expense of this? It just seems correct and right. Makes common sense to me.
Let me ask you,
I just didn't answer that.
this is a necessity for PB, right?
It is a necessity for PUB for engineering purposes.
Engineering purpose.
And
What we could look at is, and we did talk about this today, is that we do need to do this, and we do benefit, but possibly come up when we're looking at fees or looking at it as a user fee or
You gotta do that because
and bring that back to the board, but I think,
Is there any way we can find out who uses it the most?
we have to ask.
yeah,
We may be able to recover the cost. I don't think we could make, I don't think we would be allowed to.
That's what I was going to tell you, that, if developers are using it and other people, the private sector is using it, I think they should pay something, just to recoup that cost, not give it.
We can come up with
Robert has
something.
a point there. And I agree with you.
add that to the policy that I'm working on.
But right now, I think right now, what we need to deal with is that it's a necessity for PUB, let's get it done, and Big Brother needs it,
but
And find out if legal can justify either getting it back or perhaps even making money.
okay, but before we decide on it, why don't we wait till we find out if we can invoice some people? This is believe it or not, this is a business of PUB.
But I think we can do that as a policy.
People need this, and they need to pay for the service. It's extremely expensive. It's coming from a satellite.
Well,
They're getting free.
It's a plane.
Okay, it's a plane.
But yeah.
It still costs.
Yeah. Now, one thing that we do need, if we're going to do it this year, and we strongly recommend that we do it this year, then it does need to be approved today because of the weather.
Let me talk to my colleague here and the rest of my board. I think it'd be a good idea, because it is a necessity, just to go ahead and pass it, and have it come back with management and customer service and engineering. Recommendation for policy is to how you deal with those that
But you're spending the money without any income coming in. When there's a possibility income could come in.
I think we need to include legal in that discussion because it may be something we may not be able to charge for other than maybe a...
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think it'd be a good idea to pass it right now and then come back with a policy there is.
there may be something that we can't do anything about it because it may be a public record and it's a...
Makes sense.
I'll make the motion to follow staff's recommendation, but subject to latest
Come
coming
back
back.
there where we can recover the cost of it.
Your motion is to approve the bid process and get it going and ask staff to investigate and return to the board whether or not charges for the use of the information can be charged.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? All opposed?
Nay.
We have one nay. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hernandez. Item 9, consideration of approval to adopt an ethics policy regarding disclosures by staff and board members receiving anything cash or value exceeding $100. Mr. Amada, Mr. Valadez.
I think this is self-explanatory.
Is anybody tied to Abramson here?
And I'll make a motion to approve.
Let me make a comment. We did approve a policy, ethics policy for staff at the last meeting.
Well, John,
And we don't have we prefer not to have, we shouldn't accept anything. We should not set a dollar value. I think Leandro had some concern on that, but we do have a policy we adopted on taking
So you're saying exceeding zero?
Yeah. Is that what you wanted, Leandro, or?
We can make this with the board.
Yes, John, pretty much that's what when we brought the code of conduct to the board, we had kind of talked to the auditors, and they had emphasized the continuation of compliance with SAS 99. It's just an anti-fraud and code of conduct policy. We need to maintain high integrity in our daily business activity and not compromise our position with vendors by accepting gifts, entertainment, favors that could be perceived as influence. We do want to maintain compliance with the code of conduct as approved by the board, and I think that has satisfied our auditors as we continue to improve our internal policies for personnel.
Concerned it conflicts with what we just.
It does conflict.
Okay. We need to resolve that.
Well, the language on the thing does, but in other words, there's already a code of conduct for employees, and what you're trying to do is change that to allow them to receive gifts, but they don't want that.
So maybe we can table this one, Pat, and maybe.
No, you can amend your motion.
Well, then I can amend my motion just to include, just for the board.
Same, well, it'd be the
Same wording, except exclude the staff, and let's keep the.
The board is always lobbied. It's part of doing business. I mean, I just hate to see that any of us are put in a situation to where it could be looked at that we've done something ethically wrong. That's all. And I want us to, this is the public company. I want us to uphold that highest standard. I can understand a gift where somebody gives you a fruit basket, or John, you gave me a gift certificate for last year's bag and not cash, and I'll tell you right now, because I felt uncomfortable at the time, okay? This year you gave me a gift certificate to have dinner, and I appreciate it. But I would feel more comfortable because it's transparent than I'm not talking about you, but others that come to us or something like that. Christmas, I got a bottle of wine and a little $50 backpack or something like that. And that's part of being a board member. You get a gift. There's a difference between a gift and something that gives you a trip to Las Vegas or something like that could be perceived as wrong. So I would like to see what Chris is saying, that it applies to the board. Anything over $100, I think we shouldn't take it. But it should be reported anyway. You get a trip to go hunting or something like that.
Or we can make it zero, just like the.
All right, hold on. What do you want to? I mean, is the policy that you just want to have somebody have to report if you get something over a certain amount, or is the policy that you want to prohibit the board from receiving any gift over a certain amount?
I myself don't have a problem with, stop it at 100, you don't receive nothing, period. But I don't know how the rest of the board feels. I mean, they get invited on the
No, before we did, in order to discuss it, I think there's a motion on the floor by Mr. Valadez that we establish a policy that the board not be allowed to accept any gifts valued over $100. Is that your motion?
That's correct.
Reporting.
And report any gifts? Is that included in your motion?
You guys want to report?
No, I think if you receive anything under $100, I think it's okay.
Yeah, gifts that, you attend something to talk to, and they buy lunch, and you have to report every single breakfast that it's $18, $5, and actually that's your time that you're spending there. And so I think that I agree with I'll second Mr. Valadez.
But first, can we still have a
The
more
motion
discussion?
is that the board be prohibited from accepting any gifts over $100. Now you can have discussion.
Now can we have discussion? Okay. Because having had the experience, the time is going to present itself, and I don't want anybody to feel bad when they're faced with the situation. Mayor, if you get to go to Singapore, I know they're going to treat you like a king. They're going to give you gifts. I mean, they are going to give you their gifts. They may give you a saw, they may give you a tie, they may give you something like that. I don't want having to worry about that. I want him to just come and say, look, report it. There's nothing wrong with that. Because, I mean, I think for him to reject it would also be a slap in the face to your guests. I mean, it's just the way the customs are. So I think we need to be very careful. I think, for myself, you don't need to tell me, okay? I know when it's a bribe or something trying to offer me, entice me or something like that, lobby me in a way. I know that. But I think we should set a standard to where everybody can follow. I think $100 gift down, you don't have to bottle of wine, somebody sends you that. Anything over 100, I think it should be mandatory to report. Whether he takes it or not, that's a different story. But I think he should report it. Myself, that's the way I see it.
Is there a
How do you
policy
feel?
at the commission that maybe we can follow? At the city, there's no
We just have
policy?
to follow the law.
Just follow the policy. Seem to be doing that.
But I mean, I think like the congressman and all that, they just report. Right? I think that would be better because he is the representative of the city, and I would hate for him to have to worry about maybe you don't know the value of what this is, and you get it, and somebody comes by and say, you received $101.
We already have a motion on the floor and a second.
Discuss. So, do you want to? How do you guys?
I think either way, it's an improvement than we have right now. It's just easier for me to say, you know what, I'm sorry, it's $100, it's a max, and that way there's no pressure in saying, well, you took something for $125 over here and then $300. No, there's just a policy. Please understand, please forgive if I'm being disrespectful. It's easier, but either way is an improvement than what we have. That's fine.
Because you're the one that's going to be confronted with this.
Well, there's nothing wrong with any board member being in a situation where he can be given a gift in, for instance, what you're saying, Mr. Armada, and it's over $100, for him to come back and give it, turn it over to the PUB and accept it on behalf of the PUB, and that way he's not going to embarrass anybody by saying, I can't take it. Just bring it and take it and bring it to the PUB, and if they give him a saw, he can give it to the PUB, and we can use it when there's a hurricane.
So how would you recommend?
But I mean, I think that you all have to use common sense. I mean,
Like he said,
if you're at a function and they're giving the mayor something that
Oh, that's a different story. I haven't seen that one yet.
All right. The motion and the second, does it stand, or do you want to change it? Or?
I'm fine with the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Would you please read the motion?
It was $100, period. Period. Forget the.
I'll get the reporting.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Item 10, update from management on eliminating free service regarding new land developments. For instance, engineering and planning. Mr. Rizzi.
Just to comment, I'm working on a policy, we're gathering information on what some of the other cities to compare, and I'll have a policy for the board to adopt at our next February meeting.
That's it, John. Thank you. Item 11, election of board officers. Mr. Amada, Mr. Valadez.
I am a strong believer, since this is a public company, that we follow the tradition set out, I think, when Ray Lopez came to the street after Mr. Schultz, where they rotated the chairmanship based on seniority. Based on that, I know you're going to be replaced, Mr. Chairman, I think in June, whatever it is. The vice chair automatically becomes the chair because we don't have a chair. So he's going to get it automatically whether we appoint him or not, but I would like to see him appointed officially by this board based on tradition. So I'm going to make the motion to appoint Chris Valdez as chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I know that I said that I disagree with the seniority deal. I respect it, but I just don't. But I do want to make I'll go and second the motion by Mr. Amada to have Mr. Valadez as chairman.
We have a motion and a second to appoint Mr. Valadez as chairman. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Valadez.
And what about the rest of the officers?
I'm going to make a motion to appoint Robert as vice chairman based on the same thinking, seniority. I'd like to see Robert as vice chairman.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion and a second to appoint Mr. Sanchez as the vice chairman. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
And I'd like to make a motion to appoint Pat Amada as secretary.
I'll second it.
I don't have to take notes, do I?
Yes.
We have a motion and a second to appoint Mr. Almada as the secretary. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries.
Make sure your recorder works, John.
Anything else? All right, let's move on.
Thank you, John.
Let's move on to the consent agenda items. Anybody want to discuss anything? If not,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
we have a motion to adjourn. We don't have any sign-in public comment.
Well, we got to approve it.
Somebody's got to make a motion.
Yeah, we have a motion
motion.
and a second. All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. This meeting is adjourned.